Welcome to the Growing Money with Chantra's podcast. I've got a really interesting guest with me today, and just was there as we were getting started. Talk again, what my motivation is for this podcast. A lot of it is all about as I've gotten older. I didn't grow up with financial information, and I'm trying to educate myself so that I can educate my daughter. And just letting people know that's listeners know that might be tuning in for the first time. That's kind of the orientation for this podcast. And I found you. First of all, who are you and what do you do? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, you bet. So I am Clint Murphy. I, up until recently, by day, was a CFO of a real estate development company. And outside of that, I'm a husband. I've been with my wife for 29 years now. We have two boys, 15 and 12, about to be 16 and 13 in a month. That's pretty crazy. One driver and two teenagers.
That's wild.
And in the evenings, I write a newsletter. It goes out to about 26,000 people right now, host a podcast. We publish a weekly episode. And I am on social media, on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. We have about close to 500,000 people that follow us across the various platforms and learn from us. Generally, I brand it under the growth guide, the idea being I want to help people grow personally, professionally, financially. And I've left my job. So I'm finishing up some consulting with them, about 10 hours a week now. This will be the last month, and I'm starting my own real estate development company.
That's awesome. There's so much that you're doing there, and that's what's so cool. But I found you because I was searching at certain terms, and one of the things that popped up that was interesting that was on your profile listed was I was searching around the psychology of money. And it was all this mindset.
Great.
Some of the guests that I have been having come on, were talking about this mindset of abundance and money. And I was just like, but then there are other things like talking about people, how do they, and not just that type of stuff, those catchwords, but, people that have money avoidance, people that just walk away from money. There are all of these different ways that we deal with the concepts around money. Talk to me a little bit about that. Why is that on your page? What do you mean by that?
Well, I believe that a lot of us, ultimately at the end of the day, what we earn and what our wealth becomes is through us. So the more we can work on ourselves, the more we can earn. Yeah. And the more we'll feel entitled to earn it. If you look at, I look at humans, I look at us as three components. Like we're basically robots and, in a flesh suit. And right. I look at that and say, hey, we've got some components that we've got to work on. We have our hardware. That's our subconscious wiring. That's our childhood rearing. That's the stories our parents told us. And that got embedded into our subconscious and we don't really know about it. But an example is in the shadow work book, Existential Kink, she talks about an exercise where she brings up this idea that you don't not achieve your goals because you're afraid to fail. You don't achieve it because you're afraid to succeed. And you're afraid to succeed because something in that childhood rearing has taught you you're not worthy. You don't achieve wealth because you don't think you deserve it. You think people who have wealth are evil. You look at every cartoon we watched as a kid. You look at the movies we watched, and they all showed people with money as evil, right? Like Mr. Burns with his fingers as he was plotting against Homer. Like Mr. Burns was not thinking about Homer whatsoever, right? Like he was out enjoying his billions with his family, hopefully. I mean, Scrooge. You think about all that, right? That hardwires kids. That hardwires you to think that you don't deserve money and that if you have it, you're evil. And so, and there's so much more on that subconscious one. That's the hardwiring one. There's so much more to it. But when we can solve and we can understand that hardwiring and we can replace that hardware with I do deserve to succeed, I do deserve wealth, we start to change how we approach money. Yeah. So that's the hardware. From a software perspective, it's how we talk to ourselves. It's the
Yes.
thought loops that are running through our head, right? They say you have 16, somewhere in the neighborhood of 16,000 or 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of them are negative and recurring.
Yeah.
Why? Learn to recognize what are the thoughts that are going on in my head. I see them. And then you could take the Buddhist approach. You can just let them go. Like leaves falling from a tree, landing in the stream, and we just let it wash away. We don't grab them. We don't latch onto them. We don't go into them. We just let them go. Very passive. Or we could take the Stoic approach. And Stoicism led to cognitive behavioral therapy. And so the concept of thought auditing. I have that thought. I question it. Is that thought real? If I'm doing thought auditing, I might write that thought down on a piece of paper. On the right side of the page, I'll write down 4 to 5 more logical thoughts, right? My wife asked me to empty the dishwasher. She thinks I'm a lazy piece of crap. That's the thought. I write it down. More logical answer. She cooked dinner. She wants some help. She's been doing X, Y, and Z all day. She just wants some help in the kitchen, like 2 or 3 more logical ones. 10 minutes later, come back, check the thoughts. What you'll soon realize is the original thought that you have is almost always wrong.
Yep.
And so the more you question that, the more you challenge that, the more you learn to move away from your brain controlling or your thoughts controlling you to you saying, wait, I'm not going to let the monkey out of the cage unless I need it. So unless I want to use my brain to think about something specific, I'm just going to ignore the noise until I need to think. And then I'm going to be in charge, not the monkey in the cage. I'm going to put it back in there. And in Buddhism, they refer to it as the monkey mind often. And so we just lock it up, put it away. And so those are 2 different psychological ways of looking at it. We can either take the just let it go approach, don't latch onto it, or we can take the, hey, no, I'm going to latch onto this shit and I'm going to question it. And I'm not going to let it. I'm not, in Stoicism, they call it giving assent. I'm not going to give assent or permission to that thought to enter unless it's real and valid. And so that's the software. The last one I look at is I've added since made it 2, but operating systems and applications, right? Operating systems are like our daily habits. What do you do on a daily basis? You often say someone can tell you their priorities, but show me your checkbook and your calendar and I'll tell you what your actual priorities are.
Right.
And so what are you spending money on and what are you spending time on? If you want to grow your wealth, spend money and time on the right things. And then the last one is just your applications, right? Like and it ties a bit into that daily habits. Like what are those specific things you're doing every single day to make your life better? Part of the operating system might be the concept of, I always break it down to 3 things: know what you want, understand what it takes, do the work on a daily basis, day in, day out. And so that's, from the psychology of money, it's a very simple way to look at it. There's a lot more you can go into with, needs versus wants and understanding certain rules that you should follow. But at a high level, I like to think of it that way. And it's not just about money. It's if you want to grow your career, if you want to pursue anything in your life, it's just how to live a better life and be more fulfilled.
I love that. My daughter, last weekend, we went away for a holiday here in Vietnam. And we went to we went to 2 resorts. The first place, my wife was singing, and she got some tickets to this one hotel. And it was literally the worst and most awful place I've ever been in my life. It was seriously like the resort had set up these little boxes. They built this big property near the beach, and they hadn't finished like the nicer units. And so what this was obviously like these little prefabs that they just put on a property. And I could tell, I was like, in a couple of years, they're going to just bulldoze this whole place and put new stuff in here. This is just to get people into their resort, like right now, to fill the rooms. And it was kind of funny because we were just like, well, we stayed multiple times at this place up the beach. It was just a little ways up the beach, but we've been there multiple times with my daughter. We took her for her first birthday, and it was this really small, little quaint hotel that just has this swimming pool in the middle of this unit with 2 rooms. And not expensive, really simple place, but really low key nice. So my daughter's been there, but she hasn't been there in years. And she's turning 8. And when we walked into the property, she's got that stage where she doesn't remember a lot of the stuff early in her life, but there was this thing, this moment where she looked around and she's like, I've been here. I remember this. And we don't realize how strong some of that programming is that comes in, that subconscious. It is so strong. It is so strong. Those things, that foundation that has been laid. I remember as I work through and come back and look at some of the things that I grew up with. I had my uncle that was extremely wealthy, and he was a radiologist and lived in a small town in western North Carolina. And at that time, when the hospital didn't have the money for a CAT scan machine, he says, well, we need a CAT scan machine. And they didn't, like, oh, we don't have money for one. Early 80s. And he's like, all right, I'll buy it myself. And anyone who wants to use a CAT scan just has to pay me. Started making some good money. A couple years later, he's like, we need an MRI. Like, we don't have money for an MRI. So he bought an MRI machine. He bought the MRI machine. And then anyone who needed an MRI was paying him, and he made a small fortune, and it was so much money that he didn't know what to do with it. And he was, he had an Arabian horse farm, and he was taking these horses everywhere. And yet in their house, there wasn't a lot of happiness in ways. My uncle's marriage with his aunt was on the rocks, and was always fighting. He was running around and trying to air family dirty laundry. But then my family perceived that, and I remember my dad was always like, you know what, his problems are because of the money. No, the money wasn't the thing that was causing the problems. The money was an amplifier. The money was something that was amplifying what was already there. Money is this thing that, again, amplifies what's going on inside. If you're a happy person and you give that happy person money, they're probably going to find more ways to find happiness. If you are having problems emotionally, if you have problems in your marriage and suddenly you have all this extra money, I'm pretty sure that there might be an amplification of that. Maybe it doesn't, but our core things are already there. And so for me, there was this foundation laid out that money causes problems. Money causes problems. And then there was this limit that was applied to me. And for years, I was working through that. And finally, something clicked a couple of years ago, and it was just like this, wow, his problems weren't because of the money. It was something else, and again, though, it wasn't conscious. It was never conscious. It was just this programming that existed below the surface, So what you're saying rings so true.
There is an element that we do have to be aware of, Sean, in that, and it more often happens to men because they tend to be put into this position in their career as you climb that ladder and you're making that money and you're in that position of authority. You may let your ego get ahead of you and start to make mistakes. So it's not necessarily the money that's causing it, but that the money combined with power, now you have access or all of a sudden you're desirable in certain ways that you never were when you were growing up, or you were the kid in high school, or even early in your career. And so to your uncle, I mean, the situation that he dealt with is something that a lot of people in that similar situation, where they've grown a level of wealth and not just wealth, prestige, and I'm sure in his community, people looked up to him as the guy who basically owns a hospital. Right. And so all of a sudden what's coming across to him is not what was. And that can be alluring. And so there has to be this level of recognition that, wait, that is not what I want.
Yeah.
What I want is what I have.
Yeah.
Because that also ties into psychology of money, right? When we let go of I need that, or I need that extra car, or that Arabian horse, or the woman on the side. Yeah. What I need to be happy is what I have. It's my wife. It's going to the vacation spot with my 8-year-old daughter.
Yep.
That's what makes me happy. It's not this ancillary stuff that I'm chasing. But that can definitely, because money's not the cause, but it allows the access to what you otherwise wouldn't have access to.
Yeah. So true. So true. Yeah. I remember once when I first got married to my wife, and it was interesting to me because my wife is a big star in Vietnam, and I'm just your average Joe guy, And then I met her, but we connected over dogs and puppies and music, and we hit it off. When we got married, the week we got married, the press ran a story about it, and I had at least 50 plus woman try to add me on Facebook and be like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I was just like, wow, that is just, and I'm like, I just got married and some of these women are hitting on me. And it's like, that was in no way, shape, or form. I was like, well, blocking, deleting, but I was sitting there thinking, this is what happens to some of these guys. They get in this position that they don't have. I like to think that I have my head screwed on pretty straight. And, not perfect, but I kind of have a clear idea about what's important to me and what's not. And that I'm really happy about, because it has helped me in many situations where maybe I would have made a decision that wasn't the right one, But when I think about that, and when I start thinking about, again, this amplification, you see people that, for a long time in my career while I was in Asia, early on in my career, I taught children English, and I would see seeds that had been planted, seeds for people becoming superheroes, and seeds for people generally turning into rather rotten individuals. And there was a certain point in time where you could catch it. And that's what I loved being as a teacher. Like, I had one kid that he was just on track to be kind of a jerk when he grew up. Wasn't a bad kid, but just didn't handle people socially well. And I really took him under my wing for 2 years and steered him in a good direction. Now you imagine taking that same person and giving them an unlimited supply of power. It's not necessarily always a good thing, because the person hasn't learned how to be just a generally good person. And and for me, I love that you bring up Stoicism. I love reading Donald Robertson, everything by Ryan Holiday. These people that are just taking some of these classics and reinventing them for a new stage. But when I was in university, I studied actually Buddhism and Eastern philosophies. So you're speaking a lot of my language here. But there is this personal development that needs to come in. And what I love personal development. And again, what I think that when I see people doing personal development, they're talking about all of these areas of personal development, work on yourself, work on your psychology. But I still just don't often see, let's work on our psychology of money. Let's work on refining how we are viewing these things. It's an area that, again, which is one of the reasons I want to start this podcast, because don't always know how to talk about money. Don't always know how to talk about, finances. We were doing my daughter's math homework tonight, and there were some wild and crazy math problems, story problems, word problems, and not one of them talked about money. We had 8 pages of homework, and not one page of math homework talked in any way, shape, or form about some type of financial thing, like, let's talk for little kids. If I put this apple over here and, and I plant a seed, what will grow from that? Well, that's kind of an investment. You put something into the bank, it will grow, one apple will yield, 500 apples from a tree. Isn't that amazing? That's what compounding interest is. You put something away.
That's right.
And then it's not talked about, none of that's talked about. And I feel the need, my main media outlet that I've been building, and I love it, is building a kids learning channel with my daughter called Ilani's Little World. And as I was building that, I kept thinking about, as we got to teach kids about money. We got to teach kids about money. And we've done a couple of videos about money, but I would love to do more because it's just not happening.
And how old is she now? So you went there for her 8th birthday. Is she still 8 or is
She's
she
just
older
8.
now?
Yeah, she just turned 8 like 2 days ago.
Just turned 8. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's a good age to start to get across concepts of money. I mean, my oldest was about 9, I believe, maybe 10, not between 9 and 11. And I started going to a coffee shop with him and just talking about money and trying to introduce him to money concepts, but not just money, like how to grow your career, how to become an entrepreneur, things that are money and then money ancillary at that age. And it was always having to do it through the power of story.
I love that. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. If you chat with a kid about money, they might not get it.
Yeah.
And let's take a Richard Branson example. Richard Branson always says to get ahead in your career, say yes, even if you don't have the answer, figure it out after. And so when you're talking to a young kid about that, that's a very hard concept to get across, but you can use an example. And here we're in Canada, so we get snow. And so I'll say to my son, Cade, if we have a snowfall and I offered you $500 to shovel every driveway on the block, what would your answer be? And he said, well, I couldn't do it. And I said, well, no. Start with yes, and then we'll figure it out. And he's like, okay, well, what would I do? And I was like, well, how much are shovels? Like $30 each? He's like, yeah, like let's assume that, sure. I said, well, could you buy 5 shovels for $150? He's like, yeah. And I said, could you pay your friends $100 each or $50 each for 3 friends to do 2 driveways each? And he's like, yeah, that seems fair. Or 3 driveways each, $50 each. Okay, so you've got shovels. Now your friends have shoveled the driveways and you've collected $500. You've paid them $50 each. And you have 150 in your jeans, or maybe we pay one more person, so you've got $100 and 4 people made 50, and you own 5 shovels. And now next time it snows, you don't have to buy shovels. You already have the business started. You've got the inventory. So you start with yes, and then you figure it out.
That's awesome.
So you say yes, and then you go buy the shovels, and then you go hire your friends, and then you figured it out, because everything's figure outable. Right? There's a book by Mary Forleo called Figure Outable, and you can figure everything out. And so say yes and then figure it out. So that was like me and him over a Starbucks, and the number one thing, I said it earlier when I was talking about operating systems, is I reinforce with them from about the age of your daughter onwards. Know what you want, understand what it takes, do the work day in, day out. So where do you want to go to high school? You want to go to that school? What's it going to take?
Yeah.
What do you need to be able to tick the boxes on in your application? All right, let's get to work on that. You want to play college football? All right. What does the data say? Like, how tall do you need to be? You can't really control that. That's genetics. You're 6 foot already. You're 15 years old. Maybe you'll get to 6'2".
Yeah.
How much do you need to weigh? You probably need to weigh 245 pounds. You're 190. We got to put 55 pounds on in the next 2-3 years. All right. That's ambitious, but we can do it.
Yeah.
What does your vertical jump need to be? What does your sprint speed need to be? How much do you need to be benching? We go down the list. We know what you need to do. Now we need to put a plan together to do those things. And he's not doing everything on that list, but he went outside last night and came home, and I was like, oh, how far did you run? He went out for a jog. He's like, oh, 8.5 kilometers, 5 miles. And I was like, oh, 6 months ago, he never ran by himself at all.
There you go.
And now he's, a few nights a week going out for 5-mile runs. So it's just this. And when they interviewed him to get into high school 3 years ago, and they were asking about why do you want to go to this school? We had the Nest camera, so we got to watch it back.
That's
and
awesome.
He said, I want the benefit of It's a very sport heavy school. It's in Canada, but it's the most American school I've ever seen. I want the academics, and I want the sports, and I want to play college football. And if that's what I want, these are the things I have to do to get there.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh shit, like what we embedded in him from the time he was 8 or 9, because he's getting interviewed probably at about 12, right?
Yeah.
That 3 years of implanting worked. And so now like he simplified it. He just says no plan, do. And it's like, yeah, no plan, do. Know what you want, get the plan, and do it. And so from a money perspective, I look at money the same way. I know what I want financially. All right, what's the plan to get it?
Yeah.
Okay, now I just got to do it. And that boils down to investing. That boils down to my career. That boils down to my building a business. I know what I want the business to achieve 7 years from now. If I want to achieve that in 7 years, these are the things I have to be doing today to get there. And then I just got to go do them. So that that's a couple stories that I use with them. I could share one that's a little a fun one that they really love, and it gets them to laugh. And I taught them this one when they were even younger. So the idea is entrepreneurship and delayed gratification.
Yeah.
And so I say, hey, boys, if you want to make some money, there's always a kid in class who wants a chocolate bar.
Yeah.
And they don't have one. So you could buy a box of chocolate bars, stick them in your locker, and sell chocolate bars for $1, right? Like, if the economics, buy them at Costco, they're probably 50 cents or something, right? And there are kids that do it, right? They buy cookies from Subway and like 12 at a time, and they sell the cookies for $1 and they make a couple bucks, right? So I said, you could do that. And then I said, but let's add some concepts to that. That's just simple, right? But what I want to teach you is lending and interest and how it works. And they're like, oh, so how does that work, Dad? And I said, so look at your little buddy, Timmy, right? Like, let's imagine Timmy really wants that chocolate bar, but Timmy doesn't have a loonie.
Yeah.
Or a $1 bill. So what you say to Timmy is, I will give you a chocolate bar. Next week, you give me $1.50. So it's not $1 anymore. You give me $1.50 next week, and you get your chocolate bar today. That 50 cents is interest. It's probably an exorbitant rate, but hey, we're loan sharking chocolate bars here. And I said, and look, there's a concept. Like, if you're not just going to give him the chocolate bar when he owes you money, you've got to take what's called collateral. So Timmy has to give you his running shoes until he gives you the $1.50 back. And so they're like, they just always love example. And like, we'll do that with like buying apartment buildings, and I'll be like, hey guys, imagine when you're 18, I could give you 10 grand a year, and you could blow that on like fun and or you could buy an apartment unit, and that's going to pay you $1,000 a year for the rest of your life. Yep. What do you want? And like, they kind of look at me, and maybe not the youngest one, but the oldest one would look at me, and he's like, well, I want the apartment. And I'm like, that's the right choice, because now you've got money forever, right? So just planting those seeds. Like, I have a bunch of apartments or in townhouses. We'll drive them by. We'll show them to them. We'll talk about why we bought them, what they generate. We share numbers with them, net worth numbers, investment numbers. And like, what we're trying to do is, and we also say to them, hey, like, you're not rich. Your mom and dad may be, but yeah, it's mom and dad. It's like, you two got to work. Like, you got to go to work. Yeah. But what we're trying to create is, the more we talk about money, because you're absolutely right. No one talks about it with their kids. Mm-mm. Like, the more we talk about it, the more we have open, honest conversations with our kids about money. And it's like, hey, look, don't share these numbers with other people. Don't tell your friends what your mom and dad make, but you should know that. Yeah. So that when you're older, you're like, no, like, I know what my dad made. Like, I know what I want to make. Yep. I know what I've got to strive to do. And the more we have those open, honest conversations, the more they'll realize money's a tool. Yeah. And it's something that I deserve, and I'm going to work hard to get it, and I'm going to use it to build more wealth. because once I know what the tool can do, I'm going to use it effectively. So the more we can have those conversations with them, the better. And the more we can tie them to those fun little stories about Timmy and chocolate bars and, hey, like get the shovels, put your friends to work. Now they're like, oh, like that's entrepreneurship. I get it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, there's this something to be said though for, I had my point and I lost it, but it's the talking about this stuff because, you're so right. There is this absolute lack of anything said about it. When I was growing up, when we had challenges, it was something that was, behind closed doors. I didn't know what my dad made or my mom made. I had no idea what they were pulling in or what their salary might be for this job or that job. About 2 years ago, there was a Instagram page, TikTok page that popped up that I really loved. It was Salary Transparency Street, I think is the name of it, right? What they do is they just go around and ask people, what's your job? How much do you make? And at first, I was just a little bit like, ooh, I felt like offended a little bit. And I was like, why would they ask that? Why are they going out? That's so personal. But then all of a sudden I was watching that. I was like, I did not know that people in the tech industry were making such an insane amount of money. And I was just like blown away by that. And I was like, well, I'm making $260K a year, plus I got stock options and this and that. And then they interviewed the teacher, and the teacher's like, I'm pulling in $50,000 a year, and it's a very rewarding job. And I was just sitting there going, wow. It's no judgment on either of them. It's just no one talks about that, and how great it would be if they had more transparency, especially universities, before people go and pick a major,
before they, 100%. That's like they immediately the thought that goes into your mind.
Yep.
Yeah. Because it's supply and demand, right, Sean?
100%.
How many people went into teaching because they thought it was a noble profession, but now we've got hundreds of thousands of teachers, so we're not going to pay you well.
Yep.
Okay. But if we only had 10,000, we'd have to pay them really well because otherwise we'd have no teachers. But we don't have enough computer programmers, so we better pay them a lot of money. Yes, sure, they're contributing to a product that sells for a lot of money, but it's also a supply and demand metric. 100%. If we had more of them, you could pay them less. And so when you're picking your major, like I always look at it and they tell people to pick like in-demand jobs. One of the problems with doing that is whatever's in demand, people go to.
Yep.
And then the value drops.
Yep.
So pick something that it's less about in demand. It's something that always makes money. Well, it depends on what you're optimizing for. But you can get paid well, and it's something a lot of people don't want to do. And it's easy to stand out in.
100%.
Like a lot of people aren't going into accounting anymore.
Right?
We always need accountants. And if you combine that with speaking skills and writing skills, you can make a lot of money because it's easy to stand out from the other accountants.
Yeah.
But people don't tell these young kids that. And they get swamped in debt.
Yeah.
And they have no way out of it because they have no opportunity but to take that teaching job. Yeah. And it only pays $50,000. How are you getting rid of your $200,000 in Cornell loans when you're making $50,000 a year?
You're not. And they then they spin.
That whole system.
It is really And
it's
again,
horrible.
it's horrible. And I think the thing is because it all comes back to one thing. The fact that people are not talking about money. They talk about mission. They talk about drive. They talk about what you'll do, what your job prospects would look like, where you could work, what that job would look like on the day-to-day. But they, for a long time, didn't talk about what people brought home. They would say, it might be, and now in California at least, they require any job posting to list a pay range, so people have an idea.
Yeah, of the pay range is anywhere from
$50,000
to $1,250,000.
I did see that
Oh,
though.
that's a pretty broad range.
Right. This is true. Might be
It's
this.
so bad.
Might be this.
Yeah.
We'll let
It's like,
you
oh,
find
well,
out.
I'm pretty good at that job. Could I get to the higher end? No, you can't.
Right. Got lots of experience. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Good time.
But I always laugh at that because it's interesting. Like, I've left my job now, but I was CFO. I had a team of about 32, 33 people, Sean, and I've been giving them pay ranges for the last decade. Not every team in my company was doing that. I don't even know if my boss knew I did that, but all my teams knew what the range for their role was and where they were. The two metrics that we use, position and range. So where are you in that range? And then compa ratio. So compa ratio is a bit more of a calculation to kind of say, where are you relative to the range as a whole? And would kind of get them the metrics like, hey, when you start in a new role, you'll probably come in 20% of the way into the range, and you'll work your way up to that 80th, 90th percentile over 3 or 4 years as you gain experience in the role. And allowed them to say or see, where's the path? What do I need to do to keep moving my salary forward? And then I would usually share, because a lot of young accountants, so, similar to the firm, you're an accountant 2, accountant 3, junior manager, manager, senior manager, right? There's a progression. Mm-hmm. So you would share the range 1 to 2 levels ahead of them. Like, hey, you're a corporate accountant and you're going to do your articling. You're going to write your final exam. When you've passed your final exam, you'll become a senior accountant. Here's the range for senior accountants. So now they have that vision of not only what am I going to earn over the next couple of years as I grow as a corporate accountant, but what am I going to learn when I jump down into that next range as a senior corporate accountant.
That's awesome. You said something earlier that I wanted to circle back on, and with the start with yes. What other gems do you have that are things that maxims that you live by for making money or business in general?
It ties a bit to start with yes. The number one thing is put yourself in as many sink or swim situations as possible, and swim, baby, swim. So, you look at it, and it's number one way to get ahead in your career is something goes wrong and you're there to take advantage. And I look back at my career, every big opportunity was that, early in my career, in my first year at KPMG, I was on one of the biggest clients, and the senior on the job had the conversation with the firm about whether they would be promoted to manager or not. They found out they weren't getting promoted. The next day they went out with a back injury, quotation marks, didn't come back to that engagement. So now I'm a first year, the senior's gone. So now the manager is there every day, and the partner's coming out more often. And they're looking at me and saying, hey, can you do more? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Like, whatever you need. And so that experience on that one job, what happens is every other senior or manager back in the office hears that you're the guy who stepped up and you did the work that a second year or a third year would do, even though you were a first year. And they're like, hey, I want you on my next job because I know you're going to do better than the other first year in the office.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden it snowballs, right? Because if you do that on that one engagement, now it snowballs, you get picked on the better engagements by the right seniors and you're getting profile.
Yeah.
So then in your first year, when they rate the first years and they say average, above average, exceptional, you get the exceptional rating. Only 2 people in your year group of 10 get it.
Yeah.
You're one of the 2. So in year 2, you get all the best roles. You get all the best opportunities because you proved yourself in that one opportunity. And now the snowball just keeps growing. And then you get on a file, and like a lot of people, for example, back then, future income taxes, they'd switched from deferred income taxes to future income taxes. I mean, it has the word tax. Everybody automatically gets scared. And people don't want to do that section of the file. Nobody wants to touch that. It's got the word tax in it. But if you take a step back, the way I always looked at it is somebody did it last year.
Yeah.
Like they couldn't have been, like, we're all accountants here. They couldn't have been that much smarter than I am. So if they did it, then I can do it. Like I can follow what they did and I can learn and I can ask questions. And early on, I had a few seniors early in your career, ask questions, like beginner's mindset, be humble, ask. And they would look at me and they'd be like, you ask a lot of questions. And I'd say to them, well, a couple important things I want you to notice. I never ask the same question twice.
Yeah.
And I'm asking so I understand, so that what I give you is better than what you normally get. And when they review your work, they're like, oh, like this is easy to review. Like you did a kick-ass job. And it's like, okay, so I ask a lot of questions and I'll do a better job of putting them in a list and sitting down with you and asking 5 to 10 at a time instead of one every 15 minutes. But the output I'm going to give you is better than what you otherwise would have gotten, because I'm going to. So what I try to stress for people is don't just superficially understand something.
Yeah.
Really understand it. Understand the why your boss wants something. Because the last thing you want to be, like the difference to me between a good employee and an exceptional employee is a good employee, it's like a game of friggin' ping pong, right? Like they come to, I ask them a question, they go away, they come to me, I look at what they gave me, I ask them another question, they go away, they come back to me, and we do that 10 times. Like ping, ping, ping. The exceptional employee, and I've had the person who took over my job is an example of that. When I left the company, she's the SVP finance. She worked with me for 14 years across multiple companies. When I give her something to do, she goes away, and when she comes back, Sean, she says, "Hey, you asked me this. I went and dug into it. This is what I came up with, and that made me think this, and this." And so what I did was I went away and I did this, and this. And so here's where I think you wanted this to go. And I'm like, that's exactly what I wanted. Thank you. Mm-hmm. 1 round, maybe 2, right? Okay, you're almost there. Let's refine. And some of that came from that person asking questions when they were early in their career and me teaching them how I think, right? The second person, you play ping pong every time. Mm-hmm. That's part of the difference too, is you play ping pong every time. They never quite pick up step A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. You always have to walk them down that path. So mm-hmm. Definitely that. I mean, some of the maxims I always use are that you have to own your shit. Like no one's going to write you or me $1 million check for nothing. Like we have to take responsibility for our lives. That's the biggest one. Be in the right room. So surround yourself with people who are better than you at what you want to be good at. If you 100%. Want to be fit, have fit friends. If you want to be wealthy, have wealthy friends. My 2 best friends do better than me financially, I think. I don't know. Well, one of them I know. But that's great because we learn from each other, right? Like one of my friends is buying apartments now. He likely never would have bought apartments, but he knows what I've been doing with buying apartments and buying homes for the last 10 years. And he's like, hey, I'm going to start buying apartments. Doesn't quite buy what I would buy. But hey, like 20 years from now, he's going to own a bunch of apartments and he's going to be super happy he did it. So it's like finding the right people and doing certain things. Like I think you should do 3 things with your friends and with your close relationships: push, challenge, support. Same as your kids, right? Is you push them to be the best they can be. I don't give a shit what it is. Like if you want to be a hockey player, be the best hockey player. You want to be a chef, be the best damn chef. Whatever you do it to your best. I'm going to challenge you to do that, right? Like I'm going to ask you like, hey, like, did you do this? Did you do your reps? Did you go for that jog? Did you get in the gym? Like we got a gym in the backyard. Did you get in there and do your bench press? You said you want to put on 20 pounds of muscle. Are you taking your protein every day? Are you doing your creatine? Like what are you doing to achieve your goals? And then support. You say you want to achieve that. I'll put a gym in the backyard. I'll buy you your protein shakes. I'll buy you your creatine. I'll pay for coaching. Like I'm not just going to challenge you and push you. I'm going to get you the support and the tools, and I'm going to be there for you. And when you can do that with your children, when you can do that with your friends, you're all going to be better for it. So push, challenge, support. And then, and even with your team at work, right? Like, have absurdly high standards and then give them the support to achieve them. And when you do that, you're going to have a high performing team. And so then outwork the room. Like, I mean, that's the last one. It's everyone wants to, well, no, you just have to work smart. Well, no, nobody who ever achieved wealth or greatness in whatever they were pursuing only worked smart. Like, no, nobody. Like, they worked smart. Yes, you have to work smart because there's only so much you can do. But on top of working smart, you have to work your ass off. Like, you do. Later in your career, sure, you can work a little less. But for your first 15, 20, 25 years, it's a grind and you better be grinding. And if you're not going to achieve the levels you want to achieve. I mean, those are the big ones for me. There's a bunch of other ones that I always write about. I can pull some of the headlines up as we talk.
I'm loving it, man. I'm loving it. Well, this is the question I want to ask next. If you could go back in time and talk to a younger version of yourself, what one piece of advice would you give yourself, financially, career-wise?
So if I take a step back, I always say I wouldn't change anything because then I wouldn't have my kids, right? But really, like when people are asking you that question, I've also heard a good point on other podcasts. What they're really saying is, hey, if I'm 20 and I'm listening to you, what should I do? And so that's an easier way to say it, right? That's easier for me to say because I wouldn't change anything. One, I would have started building a brand sooner.
I love that.
So I would have been on social media much faster. And so anyone who's in their early 20s, even late teens, I would be on social media as a creator, not necessarily a consumer. I'd be on as a creator as soon as I could. And I would build my resume through social media. So that's one. I would focus on rare skills faster. So I've done accounting and finance for 25 years. And along the way, I've become a public speaker. I've become a writer and content creator. I would do that much sooner. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to combine skills that are rarely together. So there's not that many accountants who can get up on the stage and give a keynote or who can write copywriting material. And so take those disparate skills, bring them together, you're instantly worth more money. And then the last one is I would start working for myself sooner. So I would have left the firm much faster. I would have left the firm within 3 to 4 years and I would have gone straight into real estate. I would have done 3 to 7 years in real estate, ideally flipping out of the finance side into the development side. Yeah. And then I would have become a developer on my own by the time I was early to mid 30s. I mean, that to me is an extraordinary path. If you start on the accounting finance side, you're getting a massive skill set. You're building a great network. Like my network in the city I'm in is insane. And then you're developing the toolkit that allows you to learn and also allows you to succeed in multiple different areas in a business. Then you jump into the business you want to be in. For me, that would be real estate. I think it's a great way for young people to achieve wealth. Like I look at it, Sean, I'm not smart enough to create like the next $1 billion app, but I am smart enough to make hundreds of millions of dollars building homes. That's a formula we can all do, right? So, we talk about the concept of boring businesses. Like most of us can understand them. And so I would get into that and I would transition out of the finance side into the operational side, get the skill set and then say, thanks, I'm going to go do this on my own. Grab two or three friends who are at the shop you're at or were at the shop you're at or are in shops down the street and say, hey guys, let's do this on our own and start.
I love that.
Which is kind of what I'm doing now, Sean, but I'm 45.
Hey, you know what? Never too late, right? I love that. And I think one of the things too that really resonates with me on that is that we all have these coming back to one of the things you said at the beginning, the fear of failure, the fear of success, these things that just didn't necessarily play out the right way, but it doesn't mean that you did anything wrong or anything. just life happens the way it happens. And I think the cool part is like you just said right now, well, you're doing what you're doing right now. And that's kind of awesome. So I think
Yeah.
that's awesome. There was something that you touched on early on that I loved. And again, the saying yes and then figuring the rest out. You ever see the Jim Carrey? Of course, you probably saw the Jim Carrey movie Yes Man back in the day. It's it was
Yes.
one of the things that I think is funny is that we just don't say yes enough. You know, we love to do all of these other things and find elaborate reasons to say no. Well, this might happen, but we just don't say enough yes. And so, if you've inspired me to anything, it's to say yes more often, brother. So I appreciate that.
Love it.
How can people look you up on social media and find some of the things that you're doing? Where should people look for you online to follow your podcast as well?
Yeah, they can find me. The best spot is probably our website, thegrowth.guide, thegrowth.guide. And then on social media, the number one platform we're on is Twitter, and it's I am Clint Murphy.
That's
So
awesome.
those are the two best spots, and the website gives access to the newsletter, podcast, social media, and everything, Sean.